Stories are the most powerful thing on earth. They are literally life and death. Wars are waged based on the story of who is the hero and who is the villain. You are the result of a story your parents told each other, the one-night stand, the soulmate, and friends who became so much more. Life and death. So wouldn't you like to understand them better, these stories? How Story Works, an elegant guide to the craft of storytelling by Lani Diane Rich, demystifies stories and helps you understand why you love what you love, why you hate what you hate, and why prologues are almost always a bad idea. How Story Works by Lani Diane Rich. Available on Amazon in ebook, audiobook, and paperback form. Get your copy today.
Welcome to Still Pretty, a Buffy the Vampire Slayer podcast from Chipperish Media. I'm film scholar and full copper repipe, Noelle LaCroix.
And I'm story expert and rank arrogant amateur, Lani Diane Rich. And we are here today to talk about Flooded, the 4th episode of Season 6.
Flooded aired on October 16th, 2001, and was written by Douglas Petrie and Jane Espenson and directed by Douglas Petrie.
Just a warning, this is a fully spoiled Buffy podcast. So if you haven't seen the whole thing, then what are you doing with your life? I mean, really. If you don't let me look at the pictures, I'm going to learn everything I know about demons on the street. So let's go on patrol. In Flooded, Buffy uses her super strength to fix a leaky joint in her pipes. Not a euphemism, and ends up flooding the basement. Also not a euphemism. A plumber tells them that they need a full copper repipe, and then Tara and Willow sit Buffy down and tell her that our shitty American healthcare system sucked up all the money left behind by an insured single mother, and fuck.
It's not like it's the end of the world, which is too bad. You know, because that I'm really good at.
Anya suggests that Buffy charge for slaying, and everyone mocks her despite the fact that this is exactly what Angel is doing in Los Angeles, but whatever. Anya leaves and Xander follows her, and despite being completely justified in being pissed at how everything went down, what she's really upset about is that Xander hasn't told everyone they're engaged yet. Buffy goes to the bank to get a loan, but due to the shitty Hellmouth property values, she can't use the house as collateral. Just then a demon attacks and Buffy beats the shit out of him while his buddies clean out the cash.
I'm not saying I'm charging you for saving your life or anything, but let's talk rates.
Later, when Buffy gets mad about being turned down for the loan anyway, Willow notices and celebrates. Buffy is feeling something, and emotions are good. The gang tries to figure out what kind of demon robs banks.
I think it's Vashnik. Like, cookies.
And then Giles walks in and sees Buffy. She walks over to him, and they hug.
You're...
A miracle.
Yes. But then I always thought so.
Buffy and Giles reunite. She asks how he's been, and he asks how she's doing, and she tells him, with as little emotional affect as possible, and then says she needs to train. In a Sunnydale basement, Cookies is throwing a fit about how he robbed a bank, now he wants his pay. The head of the Slayer. And he's talking to 3 nerds, Warren, Jonathan, and Andrew. Imagine if the 7 dwarves were dweebs. There were only 3, and their names were misogyny, weakness, and homophobia. Yeah, those guys.
Okay, done. One Death Slayer coming up.
Buffy gets Giles set up on the couch, but in the middle of an emotionally connected moment, she fails to notice and just walks away. Meanwhile, the dregs of masculinity decide that they don't want to kill the Slayer, so they send Cookies out to do it. 2 birds, 1 toxically masculine stone. Back at the house, Giles tells Willow how incredibly reckless her actions were, and Willow gets angry and says she's proud of what she did. The argument escalates until we get to this.
I'm very powerful, and maybe it's not such a good idea for you to piss me off.
And that's how you set up the beginning of a fall from grace, people. Outside, Buffy and Spike meet in the backyard, where they both heard Giles and Willow arguing. They sit and talk for a minute, but then Cookies breaks in and throws Dawn and Giles around and then comes after Buffy. They fight, destroying the place, and Spike joins in to help. Buffy instructs him to get the demon to the kitchen, where they work together to throw him into the flooded basement, where she beats the hell out of the demon.
Meanwhile, the three dweebs continue their plan to take over Sunnydale, and they are gross. Back at Buffy's, the Scoobies try to repair what they can from the house, and Buffy wonders how Joyce managed to fix the place up every time she trashed it while growing up. Everybody takes a piece out to the trash, leaving Giles and Buffy alone. Buffy doesn't think she can do this, and Giles gives her an encouraging speech. The phone rings, and Buffy answers it. It's Angel. She rushes out the door to go see him.
Thanks for taking care of this for me.
All right, Noelle, so this is flooded, right?
Yes.
And we have discussed this amongst ourselves.
Yes, we have.
Yeah. So tell me, how you feel about this episode?
I hate this episode. I hate it. I just hate it.
Yep.
There are parts of it that I like, and I even hate those parts. And I'm not even totally sure why I hate it, because it's not the most hateable of Buffy episodes. I mean, not by a long shot. There's way more hateable stuff that goes down on the show. So pop culture psychology time. Lani, why do I hate this episode?
All right. Well, I will tell you, first of all, that there are a lot of reasons to hate this episode. I completely hate this episode. And I think my thought is on this, like the reasons at least why I think that I hate it, even though you are correct, not the most hateable episode of Buffy. But I think the reason why I dislike this episode so much, like I absolutely opposite of enjoy watching this episode, is that it brings into my lovely fantasy space where everything is metaphor, the reality of like bills. Like I don't want to go through my bills, and those are the things that allow me to do things I like have the internet and buy food, whatever. But this is like somebody else's bills. Like, what's worse than somebody else's bills? Buffy's bills. Like, who cares? I do not want to have to deal with plumbing, right? In my nice fantasy show. So I think that like one of the first things, like that's the feeling that I get whenever I watch this, is that stressful feeling I get when dealing with my own, life minutia. Like I don't want to deal with this with her. But in addition to that, I think like the way that she is saddled with this sudden responsibility, right? It's like, we brought you back from the dead. Now get a fucking job, loser, right? Like there's this sense of this, and then Tara and Willow, like, are they, paying rent? Like, I don't believe that Tara and Willow would actually like allow this to happen. I think that they would get jobs. I mean, don't even tell me that Tara, who's been estranged from her family while away at college, does not have her shit together on how to exist on her own, because she has been managing to keep her dorm room payments going, right? So they're running out of money. Tara and Willow are going to school full time, both of them presumably still, right? Neither one of them has, a job for taking care of this kid that they have taken on as parents. That this is the discussion they haven't had yet. They've just, spent all this money, seen all this money going out. And I understand they spent it on the shitty American healthcare system that fucks over a single mother who has both life insurance and health insurance. That's a statement, I think. The fact that we just accept this without question.
I appreciate Tara's little insert to Buffy that's like, your mom did the right thing. Like, your mom had insurance. This is not, not that we would take this opportunity to shit on Joyce, I don't think. But, I mean, maybe we would. Yeah. But I appreciate that little nod to like, look, your mom did the right thing. Like, she was really well organized. Everything was taken care of, except hospital bills. Yeah. Because fuck that.
And it's a stressful thing. Like the dealing with the bills and the economics of death is incredibly stressful. The idea of being a 21-year-old kid who suddenly has to take care of a teenager and maintain a house and all of that. I mean, Jesus Christ, like that's a lot. And it's one of the things that like when you look to Buffy, these are the things that you don't really want to have to think about, right? And so all of that together, like it's one of the things that we come into Flooded and I'm like, ugh, and we get the same thing at Double Meat Palace where we're like dealing with Buffy's shitty fucking job. Like these are the things that I don't really want in my demon vampire fantasy story that is supposed to be all about like, mythology and metaphor and all of that kind of stuff. Like, yeah.
Isn't Double Meat Palace also Jane Espenson? Or am
yes.
I?
Yes, it is.
All right.
It is also Jane Espenson. And the thing is, I love Jane Espenson.
I do too.
One of the things that I absolutely fucking adore in this is cookies, right? I love that. And I will say that always, forever. So
it's
like,
so good.
It's her play with words and all of that kind of stuff and her sense of humor, like I absolutely adore. And so there's a lot of stuff in this episode that I actually do enjoy. But it's the day-to-day stress of like it's like the opposite of ASMR, right? ASMR is supposed to like calm you down and make you feel good. And this is like, hey, bills. So yeah, I don't want to see that in my TV generally. I understand why they're doing it. I understand the vision of this season as being like the reality of adulthood. But I kind of wish we'd done that with metaphor rather than the actual, reality of adulthood. I automate all of my bills. I automate everything. I give them a credit card at the beginning of the agreement and then I just never think about it again because it makes me insane, So the idea of Buffy also, and Buffy, hey, we brought you back from the dead, get a fucking job, deadbeat. Like,
yeah, she's so funny. She's like, but I wasn't spending any money. I was all dead and frugal, which is one of my favorite lines.
Which is a point that I definitely feel for Buffy.
I was all dead and frugal. How is this my problem now?
How is this my responsibility? You brought me back from the dead. I am the Slayer. Like, how is this my responsibility? Like, I mean, I get how it's her responsibility because it's her sister, it's her mom, it's her family, yada, yada, yada. It's her house.
Yeah.
But Tara and Willow were dealing with this. Like Tara and Willow were addressing the problem of bills, and that it never occurred to Tara or Willow that maybe one of them needs to go to school part-time and get a full-time job. That maybe one of them needs to do it. Also, let's just visit this, right? Willow has the power to bring people back from the dead. She doesn't have the power to make the electric company think they've been paid. Like, how does that?
She can turn on a phone. Like they're at the Texaco Corral with all of the, the knights
and she
of
can magically make this old payphone work, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But she can't make and also she can mundanely make the electric company think that they got paid because she has, computer hacker skills. So, so like there's that like Willow has all of this power. She can't use it for like,
Oh, but Willow is more interested in using power for things she shouldn't be using power for.
All right, so let's take that as a segue because hot damn.
That is how you do a segue on this show.
I got to say, very nicely done. Very nicely done. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Willow and her power and everything that is going on because, hello, this is where Willow gets very, very interesting and scary.
Yeah. For as much as I hate this episode, I mean, and this is one of the things I love in this episode that I also hate is Giles and Willow.
Yeah.
And this whole
absolutely.
scene, this whole damn scene that they have together in the kitchen. Giles, when Giles enters the kitchen, I'm just going to walk through it because it's so masterfully done. In so many ways.
I love this scene.
So I'm just going to geek out about this scene for a few minutes.
Absolutely.
So I'm talking about the scene where Willow is talking to Giles and Giles is telling me about the spell. So Giles enters the kitchen. He's just talked to Buffy. Willow says, "Isn't it awesome?" And Giles says, like the best non-committal noise. Like he's not going to give her a yes or a no. And he pauses for a second and then he says, "Tell me about the spell you performed."
Yeah.
And this is the Willow of my heart. She's so happy and excited to have someone to brag to. I mean, she is sitting there like a little girl with
somebody
milk and
who
cookies.
Understands what she did, right?
She's so excited. Like this is a child who just like mastered a really difficult skill.
Yeah.
Having her milk and cookie break and like so excited to tell you about what she did with her day.
Right. Mm-hmm.
She cannot wait to tell him about how amazing this was, how scary. And when she says so scary, like it was a cool, positive thing.
Yeah.
You can see the oh shit feeling hit Giles. Like you can see it. It's like a force in the air in the room.
Right.
It's amazing. And the way she punctuates the description of the spell with a bite of cookie is just like masterful. Like she's not only is she so pleased with herself and like so ready to like celebrate this victory, but it just like nothing makes somebody look like a little kid more than taking a bite out of a cookie.
Seriously.
Like it's just there's something very childlike about it that I really appreciate. And then he calls her stupid.
Yep.
And oh boy. And her face just falls. And she says, I thought you'd be impressed or something.
Right.
And he gives her a full-blown work dad, I'm not mad, I'm disappointed lecture. And he's absolutely right in everything he says. He trusted her the most of all to respect the forces of nature. And this is something that I love about Giles and Willow and about this scene in particular. They've had a close working relationship for a long time now.
Yeah.
And they're very much on equal ground in a lot of ways when Giles leaves.
Yeah.
You know, and in a little bit of metatextual support for that idea, Allison Hannigan replaces Anthony Stewart Head in the opening credits in that spot. It goes from the and Anthony Stewart Head as Giles card to the and Allison Hannigan as Willow card. Like there's a little bit of an acknowledgement on the part of the show itself.
Yeah.
That these people are not interchangeable, but are equals in terms of what they're able to do.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, they're peers. So it's, I mean, it's so hard. It's so hard to see Willow get shot down by Giles, but of course he's absolutely right.
Yep.
Everything he says is absolutely spot on. You can see like the weight of his age and experience like coming into this conversation. But what I love is that he is correcting her. He's trying to shift her perception of what she did. And then she stands up. And she stands up as she says, Giles, I did what I had to do. I did what nobody else could do. And she's still very much convinced that she's right. And that what she did was good.
That he's not patting her on the head and saying how amazing she is, because he's the one, like when you have a certain level of expertise, you can tell people what you did, but they can't understand like what it means that you did that, you know?
Yes.
But somebody who has the expertise can understand it and should be impressed. And that's where she's coming from. And here she is. He's the only one who can understand what she did. And the problem is he does. He understands exactly what she did. And it was fucked, you know? And when he lays into her, I mean, my God, you rank arrogant amateur. Like he is getting the point across. And I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that she... Like she just wants some goddamn credit, you know, like
exactly.
She really wants some credit.
I understand that. Yeah.
And she said, you know, and he says, there are others in this world who could do what you did. You just don't want to meet them. And that she's a little bit taken aback and she says, no, probably not. But well, they're the bad guys. I'm not a bad guy.
Right.
I love everything about this line. I love the foreshadowing in it.
Right.
I love the way it speaks to Willow's youth and inexperience. And I especially love this example of the egoic thinking that we all engage in from time to time.
Yeah.
And especially when we are called out or challenged to see a situation.
When I read that note in your notes, I was like, oh, and I had a flash of like 5 or 6 incidents in which I'd been called out. And my first response was this shit, right?
Yeah.
You know, like I know we all have that. And it is such a natural kind of human response. But yeah.
It's so, I mean, it's so great. And it's such a real response to being challenged to see a situation and especially ourselves in an uncomfortable light. I mean, Nazis are bad. We're good, but I'm a cheerleader. Like, you can't, we have these narratives about ourselves.
Right. That kind of keep us safe from that sort of criticism. And then when you have that criticism, you're like, well, damn, you know, like your first instinct is, no, that's not possible because I'm one of the good ones, you know?
Yeah.
And then you realize, right? But it takes a little bit, you know, to realize that. And yeah, that is such a wonderful expression of that.
Yeah, I mean, we see it all the time, right? The only moral use of this power is my use of this power.
Exactly.
No one else should use this power because they're the bad guys. But
they can't be trusted with it.
It's like, really, can you? And I appreciate that Giles doesn't acknowledge Willow saying, I'm not a bad guy, except to kind of indicate, like, he's got his back to her because he's doing something at the sink. He's washing something or cleaning. But he's got his back to her, so he doesn't really acknowledge that statement.
Yeah.
I'm not a bad guy. He just kind of moves his head to show us that he's heard her.
Yeah.
Which, again, I appreciate. But then, of course, he whirls around. He says, I wouldn't congratulate you if you jumped off a cliff and happened to survive.
Oh, my God, I know.
She says, that's not what I did, Giles. And he says, you were lucky. And she says, I wasn't lucky. I was amazing. And again, I'm like, I am with everyone in the scene.
Yes.
Like, I am with both of them. Because, like, she was amazing, but that doesn't, like, both things can be true. Like, you fucked with forces that you shouldn't have fucked with, and you were amazing.
And
like,
what happens when you're very good at a bad thing? Like, there is a love story with the work when you're good at something, right?
Oh, yeah.
And the thing that makes this so wonderfully complicated is that Willow is very good at a very dangerous thing. You know, and when that happens, what happens to good people when that happens? You know, I used to talk about Breaking Bad being a good example of what happens when you're really, really good at a very bad thing. But Breaking Bad also had like this other complicated element of, was Walter White actually a good guy or was he just a weak guy? You know, so many really great questions there coming up in my Breaking Bad podcast. Just joking. I'm not doing a Breaking Bad podcast, but
please
but
don't.
I think that it's really interesting having Willow in this circumstance where she is very good at a talent she developed to help the Slayer, to help keep people safe, you know?
Yeah.
But then, like, the power that gave her to shape the world in the way that she saw fit, that's a villain role.
Right.
You know, and I love that this, you know, this arc for her is a natural arc that crosses over from good guy to like not good guy. And I love that run for her, that's a natural shape of that arc and it lands in that place, you know, when you take it too far. And to have that kind of power, to shape the world the way that you want it. Who among us wouldn't make some of these choices and think that it was okay because we are not the bad guys? Like, it's good. It's real good.
Especially at 20, 21. Like,
oh, fuck yeah.
I mean,
oh my God.
I was talking just the other day with a beloved friend about decisions that we made when we were 20 and 21 and how it seemed like such a good idea at the time.
At the time, like, it does seem like such a good idea, right?
I mean, I love this fight. I love this fight. I hate this fight.
Yes.
But I love them both doubling down on their respective positions. I love Willow and Giles as equals. I love that both of them are given equal emotional weight within the scene. Yeah. In terms of the writing and in terms of the direction and the framing.
Yeah.
When Willow is standing at the breakfast bar and Giles is standing in front of the kitchen door, they appear to be the same height.
Yeah.
Like, we have seen them hug. We know they're not the same height at all.
Yeah, but they are equals. They are peers, and that's how we see it. Yeah.
And I also love that the music does this kind of ominous thing. Like, it's so foreshadowing. It's so getting us ready for what is going to happen with Willow. And it's just so well done.
Yeah.
And then there's this thing that happens with Willow where she's sticking up for her own power. And she says, and maybe it's not a good idea for you to piss me off.
Oh my God.
Giles
Yeah.
has no response to this except to look ever so slightly shocked and then break eye contact, which seems to snap Willow out of it for a split
Yeah.
second. It's a beautiful acting
it's
moment. It's
wonderfully
tiny.
done.
She has been looking at him with this unblinking stare, and then he breaks eye contact and she blinks and kind of shudders like she's startled herself with this kind of bold threat. It's just, it's really good acting. It's really good acting. It's
No, it
great
really
acting on
is.
the show. I have said it many times. I will continue to say it. I love those tiny little choices that actors make that really let you all the way in to what's going on with them. And she says, I'll think about what you said, and you try to be happy Buffy's back. Oh God, Willow and her growing need for everyone to be happy. It's like, it grates so hard because it's so born out of this insecurity that has been, I think, bubbling under the surface this entire time. But now Giles has really pointed up like exactly what she has done. And how that's a problem. And it just that be happy insecurity comes back, and I just, oh God, it gives me feelings. It's so uncomfortable, but it's so good. And then to end this fight, we give Giles the last word. And we don't see Willow reacting to what he says about not knowing where Buffy was and not being convinced she's come back, quote unquote, undamaged, which is such a hard choice of words. And we don't see Willow react because by that point we've cut to Buffy outside, and the suggestion with the visual and the audio is that she is hearing this, that she and of course Spike are overhearing this fight,
overhearing
and
that whole thing.
Oh, it's brutal. It's emotionally brutal, and it's so well done. It is so well done, but I just hate it.
I know. It's so wonderful. Like, I hate it and I love it, you know, I mean, and I hate it in all the ways that I should, and I love it in all the ways that I should. It is really, like, you know, one of the best parts of this episode. And that's the thing, like, even the parts we love, right, are still difficult, you know, but it's so good.
But like, that's kind of it for me in terms of like stuff I really like want to geek out about in this episode, because everything else I just kind of feel like, oh God, really? I mean, except Buffy applying for a loan. I feel like Buffy, you know, I didn't know exactly what you would need, so I brought everything.
Oh my God.
Buffy applying for a loan is me preparing for everything I'm new to and uncomfortable with. So I felt like I felt seen and acknowledged in that moment, but also like I don't want to see that. That's a bummer.
Yes. I know it is. It's a bummer. The whole thing is a bummer, you know, and then she's there, you know, in the bank trying to get money because suddenly she has to deal with this responsibility, which is so unfair. Like, I fucking hate that. But one of the things, though, that, you know, I thought was kind of interesting, I had the wonderful opportunity to actually watch this episode in the company of Dr. Kelly Jones, who all of you will remember from Big Strong Yes and from Still Dead, the Angel podcast. And as we're watching it, we're watching the scene where they're telling Buffy about her money problems, right? And then Anya says, hey, why don't you charge for it, right? Which isn't a problem when Angel does it over in Angel in Los Angeles, right? You know, but now it's suddenly unthinkable for Buffy. And Kelly says, why do we villainize women when they ask to be paid for their work? And I was like, oh, hot damn. Hot damn. Drop that mic, Dr. Jones. And so I wrote it down. Actually, a lot of things I will be quoting Dr. Jones throughout this episode, because every time she said something, I was like, oh, that's really good. I'm gonna write that down. But it's, you know, I mean, it's interesting that Angel charges, and that's okay, but she can't, you know. Everyone rolls their eyes at Anya when she suggests it. Like, it's just the absolute worst thing in the world for her to say, hey, you know, I mean, here she is. She's the Slayer, but because she was born to it and called to it, the Watchers who get paid don't have to pay her or, you know, care for her or take care of her at all. I find that appalling. Yeah.
The fact that this episode has no discussion of the pay structure or lack of same within the
Yeah.
Slayer Watcher.
Yeah.
So, like, it's anyway.
This isn't something nobody says, hey, let's go to the council and tell those fuckers that it's time they paid up. Hey, let's do this, right?
Yeah.
Nobody ever says time for the Watchers Council to pay up, but they paid Giles retroactively his Watcher's salary and reinstated him. He's getting a salary.
It really does raise the question of who is supposed to be caring for the Slayer.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Because arguably, Watchers getting paid and Slayers not getting paid suggests that someone, that we're not paying the Slayer because someone is taking care of her.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like that. I mean, that's the most generous reading of that.
The parents who are soon to be devastated because at 18, the Watchers killed the Slayers.
Like what? Huh? Yeah, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
Mm-hmm.
Except that, like, okay, we've had a lot of actually really good ideas from Anya this season so far and last season. I mean, Anya's kind of on fire.
Anya saved the goddamn world. Between the troll hammer and the Dagon sphere, I mean, and the Buffy bot, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Anya saved the fucking world with her plan, and she never gets credit for anything. Everybody always rolls their eyes at her. I find it really irritating. It feels gaslighting to me because she's kind of amazing.
Well, and she understands how things work. And like in this scene where Anya's going over the bills and, you know, Buffy has that line about I was all dead and frugal that I love so much.
Yeah.
Anya explains in very simple terms, this house all by itself, just sitting here costs money.
Yes, it does.
Which is a great way of explaining like that issue. Like, how is it possible that you can be all dead and not spend money
exactly
and still owe a bunch of money? So Anya, not only does Anya understand how things work, but Anya has this great and actually like really astute observation that you are providing a service and you should be reimbursed for that service.
Yeah.
But it's a joke. Everyone's like, no, not possible, because capitalism and patriarchy go hand in hand. I mean, active, systematic participation in capitalism is hypermasculine, and hypermasculinity is almost by definition obsessively anti-feminine and anti-woman.
Yeah.
So, of course, women don't get paid for the work they do. Like
unpaid labor. Yeah.
Like that, you know. And not only do women not get paid for the work that they do, but a woman who pursues payment, like that would be horrible.
Yeah.
And it's framed that way. It's like
women
Dawn
are actively discouraged.
No.
And this is part of the reason why women don't get paid more, you know, at an equal level to men, is because often they don't ask for it. You know, not saying that I'm not blaming the woman for this, but I'm saying women are actively discouraged from asking for it. And when they do ask for it, they often get refused. So, I mean, like, this is the kind of thing that, you know, that we as women are coming from, you know, just an uneven playing field in how we are valued, the expectations of what we should get for our work. I mean, women are socialized for sacrifice, right? You know, and that's kind of part of that whole game, too.
Well, and there is literally one field in which women earn more than men. Do you know what that is?
I have no idea.
It's modeling.
Wow.
Models, female models earn more than their male peers. And that is the only industry in which that is true. And I think that speaks to a lot.
Yeah.
like a lot. But so it's not just that the Slayer doesn't get paid, right? It's that when someone, another woman, interestingly, who is also mocked for her business savvy. Now, I mean, we could go down a rabbit hole of like participation in, like, active participation in capitalism.
Yes.
Being not so great for women for all these reasons and, you know, all of that. But when a woman who knows about finances and how money works, hashtag how money works, says, hey, you should charge. the reaction is not just it's not just a mocking reaction, but it's a horrified reaction.
It's an actively hostile reaction.
It's a that would be almost like that would be immoral and unethical to charge for saving people's. I think it's Dawn who says you can't charge innocent people for saving their lives.
Cops get paid. Also, doctors get paid.
Well,
look, if you're talking about,
don't get me started on cops. This is not no.
Yeah, we're not going to have that discussion. But my point being is that apparently you can, and doctors get paid, right? You know, if somebody is dying and comes into a hospital and doesn't have insurance and can't pay. You know, I mean, it's one of these things where like people, how is it any different to say you don't have the insurance for this, treatment? So we're going to do the absolute bare minimum for you, charge you out the wazoo. You're never going to be able to, get away from all of this medical debt that you've incurred. I mean, and that also, even for people are discouraged from going to get the help that they need because they know they won't be able to afford it. So people die all the time. In our healthcare system, which I say in finger quotes, right?
Yeah.
Because, and here we also have an example of exactly the ways in which our healthcare system is absolutely fucked. And no one bats an eye. No one says what the actual fuck. Everybody says, oh yeah, absolutely. We have an insured woman who did everything right to take care of her family and it still got fucked.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's that line at the bank when the loan officer says, he says, you have no collateral, you have no job. I forget what the first word is, but the second thing he says is you have no job. And then of course the demon shows up and Buffy says, no job, I wish, or something like that.
Right.
And this, again, this tension with she has a job. She literally has a job that doesn't pay her
anything, but she has this responsibility, and it is a responsibility that cares for society. And the whole thing, and that's part of this whole episode is so frustrating because we have here an illustrated example of the way in which our healthcare system is completely and totally fucked, and we don't acknowledge it. We don't even get a moment where somebody's like, well, this is bullshit. Nobody, they're just like, this is just the way it is, we accept it, right? And so all of this is irritating, and this episode is illustrative of so many things that are just fucking wrong, and yet we don't question it. We just say, this is how it is, we accept it. And the one person who says is actively mocked. So
who is often Anya is often actively mocked for her real legitimate observations about what's going on. Shall we talk about Xander and Anya and their engagement?
I guess if we have to.
Okay.
I know.
Real talk, that's how I feel about this whole episode.
Exactly,
I'm like, do we have to talk about this?
Have to, yeah.
But she has a very real concern here, especially because, as she points out to Xander, getting married was your idea.
Yeah.
This was your idea, and you gave me this ring, but now I can't wear it or tell anyone.
It's been 5 months.
Come on.
And he's clearly, he was the one, this was his thing. He was the one who proposed to her. It was this whole thing. And now he's just refusing to tell anybody, refusing to acknowledge it, right? And that's part of making it real, is the acknowledgement amongst friends and family and all of that kind of thing, right? That's how you make things real, is you tell people, and he's refusing to do that. And I don't blame her for being upset about that.
Yeah, I don't either. I don't either. And it's, again, her frustration with him, her very real valid frustration with him, being in a relationship with somebody you love and then you can't tell anybody. No. That's a shitty feeling.
It is shitty. Yeah.
But, then again, it's comedy, right? It's great writing for Anya, but we're supposed to laugh at her when she says, hey, you tricked me just now with your fancy talk and lips. It's supposed to be tee-hee. Anya is super emotional over this thing. Xander is just trying to do the calm, measured, grown-up, adult man thing. And
No,
No.
he's doing the manipulative version of what Willow does with the special, I can't remember, Leith's Bramble or whatever, when she makes Tara forget so that they don't fight. He is doing, I mean, the thing is, it is a manipulative thing that he does, which he clearly knows works, because she said, no, you do it again. She's like, you keep doing this where you trick me.
Shit. That's a good catch.
Right?
Yeah.
So he has been doing this all along. And she's like, no, it's not going to work this time. But I mean, he's been manipulating her to shut her up about this whole time. And yeah, it sucks. Like, the way that Xander treats Anya sucks. It has sucked since the day that they got together. He has never appreciated her. She is amazing. You know, and yet she is the comedy mule and we just make fun of her. And honestly, Hell's Bells, I look forward to it, because post Hell's Bells Anya is the Anya that I signed up for. Yeah. That's the Anya that I love. And people start taking her fucking seriously again, which I love. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm fine with laughing at Anya or laughing with Anya when she's being ridiculous and like not understanding how to human. Like, there are moments where I feel like that is fine and valid, but when she raises real concerns or has like actually helpful ideas and observations and it's like, oh, tee-hee, Anya, no thank you. No. No,
I don't. When she's being kind of dismissed, you know, it's really irritating, especially when she's right and when she doesn't get credit for the things that she does and the ways that she helps and participates, you know, within this group. That, it really super fucking irritates me. But one thing that I did enjoy, though, in this whole thing is cookies, right?
Cookies.
I love a demon called Cookies. And this is where I would like to have my, you know, my moment of Dawn, right? Everybody hates Dawn. Well, not everybody. A lot of people hate Dawn, right? And the thing is that I was irritated by Dawn, too, until I started doing a critical read of this, you know, of this show. Because the more I look at Dawn, the more I actually pay attention to Dawn, the more I kind of love Dawn. I love her whole thing about, well, if I don't, you know, read about demons here, I'm going to learn everything I know about them on the streets. Like, I love that.
She's adorable and hilarious.
I love
so
her
good.
whole, that's not a horn, right? You know, I mean, I love the whole thing. And I love the fashnik, like cookies. Like, that's cute. That's clever. I like Dawn. So I just want to say we have some adorable Dawn. I think we have more good Dawn than we have bad Dawn. Honestly, I think the balance, you know, from the time she picked up the coat rack and beat the shit out of a Queller demon, I love
how you come back to that every time you talk about Dawn. Like, I don't blame you because it's badass. Yeah.
I mean, and there are lots of examples of badass Dawn, but that was the one that woke me up. That was the moment. And I think it's why I always go back to it. That is the moment that I was like, hey, wait a minute. That's pretty badass. And we never give her credit for that. We never give her credit for any of the stuff that she does. You know, we just think about the annoying parts of Dawn. And the thing is that they make Michelle Trachtenberg scream a lot. When Michelle Trachtenberg screams, I get it.
It's a great scream, though.
It's a great scream, but it is also really kind of like nails on a chalkboard irritating. And like, I get it. Like when she screams, get out, get out, get out. I get it. When she screams, glory, glory, glory. Like, I get it. It's irritating, you know, and but I mean, seriously, like, she's badass and I love her. I really do. So that was a really good moment. Although I liked when I was watching again with Dr. Jones, her comment about Cookies was, it's a bad mercenary business model. Get the dead slayer first, then rob the bank. And I was like, yeah, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, he should have done a demon thing rather than, like, you know, living to the you know, the word of his contract. He's a fucking demon. He can do whatever the hell he wants.
Yeah, I like that we're told. I like that we're told that they're mercenary demons, and like that is enough to explain how these three misogynist geeks got a hold of this demon. It's fine. All right. I mean,
it's just, and I guess that means that we have to talk about.
Oh God. Okay.
You know, I just the three scrota. Is that what? I don't know what the plural of scrotum is. But yeah, they're terrible, and I hate them.
Depends on if it's Greek or Latin. I mean, I don't know. Scrotums have a real function. Scrota.
I think it's scrotums.
They have a real and valid function, and that's fine. These guys have no.
They have no function. They contribute nothing to society. They're just terrible, and I hate them. they irritate me because they represent the absolute like worst elements, I think, of masculinity. And so this is going to be a discussion that we're going to be having throughout this season. I would like to say we're not saying that all men are terrible. There's nothing like that, but we're talking about there are toxic things, there are toxically feminine things that women do. These are toxically masculine things that come from a masculine tradition within our culture. And we're going to talk about those things, and that is things, but it's not a man-hating show. Some of my favorite people are men. I just want to say that. So misogyny, weakness, and homophobia, right, are these three.
I'm just sitting here with my little like misandrist lapel pin. Like, it's fine. Anyway.
You're not you have a son, I know, and your son is
don't
amazing
label
and
me.
wonderful.
You don't know my life. No.
You don't know anything about me.
You don't know anything about me. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. These dudes, when they showed up, I was like, oh boy, here we go. Like, how
do I want to have? I don't want to talk about these guys.
I don't want to talk about them. I don't want to talk about them. And we have to talk about them because they are a staple of this season.
Well, it's the grossness of Warren. All of them have grossness, but Warren is kind of, I feel like he is the central, like without Warren, these other two would just be weak, floating around, not doing anything, but he gives them focus, and he like infects the whole thing with this misogyny, with seeing women as objects, take over the world, and chicks, which
is Jonathan's line.
It's Jonathan's line. Jonathan is weakness. Jonathan is the absolute manifestation of weakness, just character, weakness of character, which is disturbing in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I mean, I will get more into this as we go along. I think because this is the episode that introduces these three guys as a unit, as the patriarchy.
Oh, there you go.
Rob Hyrett, who does Metaphors Be With You, had a better one that I can't say because it's like quasi-Italian, like the patriarchio, maybe? Anyway.
Yes.
Like, hot take, these three dudes are problematic, right?
Yeah.
Like, we know they're problematic because they are literally hiring demons. We hear about all of the bullshit that they did in the past.
The list of things that they want, the idea that it is not at all a problem for them to be like, oh yeah, make Buffy our sex slave, like this kind of thing.
But okay, here's the problem that I have with this is they are. It's ironic lampshading, right? It's the writers sidestepping the misogyny in the humor of these three as villains by pointing it at, like, we're pointing out that they're horrible by making them villains.
Right.
But we're still using the sexism and the homophobia as a source of humor. Like,
right.
it's so
funny because it's cute almost, right?
Well, and that's something that we see. I don't know that it started with Revenge of the Nerds in 1984, but this idea of the nerdy guy misogyny, that is somehow like the
nerdy guy fights back, and yet, Revenge of the Nerds, let's not forget, has a rape scene in it. Like a rape scene played for comedy, which is just disgusting. Not entirely unlike, 16 Candles. We have that there too. And another nerd situation, right?
Yeah.
Where we show these nerds establishing their masculinity by raping women. And that is disturbing on so many levels that for them to establish their masculinity, they have to do it through the venue of misogyny.
Because that is what I mean, that is what hypermasculinity is. That is the framework. The framework of masculinity is that it rejects anything that is feminine.
Right. And rejects that and defines that as bad in and of itself. And so to access their own power through the objectification of women, right? In both of those movies, you know, and we see that now happening as a continuing trend here 20 years later. This was 20 years after Revenge of the Nerds and 16 Candles. And here we are in this same place where it's cute, right? And I think that like one of the things is that like, does the text rubber stamp, you know, that all of this stuff as though it's good? When you have a hero do something or say something like, say, Xander, and then we say, oh, isn't that cute? Isn't that funny? That's rubber stamping it, right? Now, here we have villains. And villains, you know, people are allowed to do bad things in fiction. They're absolutely allowed to. As a matter of fact, I encourage it. That's what makes fiction fun, right? But when you bring in elements like this and treat them as though they are funny, even when they're villains doing them, that is a little bit of rubber stamping. That is a little bit of saying, hey, isn't this cute? As opposed to, hey, isn't this like incredibly damaging to women and, you know, like dangerous? Because it is exactly this kind of mindset that makes the idea of that particular kind of rape, right, somehow not rape. Right? Somehow this is cute, you know, that the only kind of rape that counts as rape is the kind where the woman knows what is happening to her in the moment, which sometimes doesn't happen, where she can scream no and fight, and then he forces himself anyway. Like that is the only kind of rape that culturally, up until like a very recent moment, and even still we struggle with it, where we will actually view it as, you know, as this is a bad thing. And the fact that we look at this as cute and funny, you know, not good.
It's a tricky thing with Warren, Jonathan, and Andrew, I think. And obviously right now we're just working off this one episode. We're working on like, how are they introduced? Right. They're introduced as kind of what? Like they're bumbling. Right. They set out to be supervillains. And because the framework goes, the story says that because these three nerdy guys who like action figures and tabletop games and make references to Star Wars, because these are the guys trying to take over Sunnydale, that they are not to be taken seriously as villains, even though what they're doing and what they're proposing is dangerous. It is, you know, predatory. The framing around them, I think, by the show is, but we don't take them seriously because they're not real men. Like that is the...
Right. Because they're nerds, which also, by the way, and another thing that was pointed out by Dr. Kelly Jones when we were watching this is that it really takes down fan culture. You know, the idea that the people who feel passionately about Star Wars or about like various, you know, entertainment properties are essentially this thing. It's associating this kind of grossness with that as well, you know, and using that as a shorthand for why we don't take these people seriously. And as somebody who's very deep into, you know, like a fandom and loving something so much that you'll spend 4 years of your life talking about it nonstop on a podcast, right?
I don't know anyone like that.
I don't know anybody
made that
like
up
that.
just now.
I don't know. You know, the idea that is something that was used as a shorthand to say how little we need to take these people seriously, you know, is kind of interesting. And, you know, and let's not forget, Jonathan is already a rapist, right? Superstar, the Swedish girls that he tricked into.
I had a moment of, what now? And then I was like, oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Didn't take it seriously then, not taking it seriously now.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's an interesting, like, self-own, right? That I was like, wait, Jonathan, really? Yes. Yep. Exactly. Like, that was nice trick show, nice trick culture. I managed to forget the extent of his
yeah, that his pedigree coming into this is not great. Like, you think of Jonathan as the guy that gave Buffy the umbrella at the prom. Like, that's the first thing that you think about when you think of Jonathan. But you don't think about the fact that he was, you know, he manipulated the entire world. He, you know, and then raped these two girls, you know, who seemed to consent at the time, but did not, because they weren't in control of their minds. Yes. I mean, that's the whole thing. Like the way in which we look at Jonathan specifically, you know, and at Andrew as we move forward with Andrew and Warren, we see him for the gross, disgusting piece of dirt that he is.
And thank God, because, you know, sometimes you just need to flay a man, and Warren is a great candidate. Really,
I think if you're going to flay somebody, that when you flay Warren, and especially as we see what Warren does throughout, because Warren in Dead Things becomes a murderer. You know, and, you know, I mean, he tried to rape Katrina. Just because she woke up doesn't mean that didn't have every intent of doing that and is still not responsible for that choice. Just because he got interrupted does not mean that that's not what he is, exactly what he is, you know.
And Warren is the one all along who, even as these dudes are introduced, he's the one who has the power, right?
Yeah.
He is the most, because what we're playing with here is the masculinity of these three guys,
right,
or lack of, you know, access to the hegemonic ideal of masculinity, blah 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 blah,
right?
Academic gender studies.
I love it
because Warren is the closest to the hegemonic ideal of masculinity. Warren is positioned as the leader. It's Warren's idea to take over Sunnydale with, you know, all of these schemes. Warren, more so than Andrew or Jonathan, is
yeah, but I mean,
how do I want to express this? And just like, I hate him so much.
Yes.
I'm just so ready for him
to be flayed.
I'm so ready for it.
Let's flay Warren right now.
Feminist icon, Dark Willow, flaying Warren. I'm here for it.
It's pretty damn good. But one of the things too is that, like, you know, all it takes for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. Now, I'm not going to argue at all that Andrew and Jonathan are good men. No, I think that they are. They're very easily, you know, kind of. I don't think that they on their own would probably do a whole lot. Although I guess, you know, well, I don't know. No, I take it back. Jonathan has already, you know, shown himself to be what he is in Superstar. And Andrew, although this is, you know, informed, right? Because they couldn't get the guy who played Tucker. So they got Andrew to come in, and he sent, I don't know, flying monkeys on the school play, which is an episode of Buffy that we never saw. But I'm certain Buffy, you know,
which
stopped
is such
that
a bummer.
plan.
Like,
yeah. I want to see that. I really want to see that. And then how funny it is. They're like, run, Juliet. Like, how they thought that was so funny that this girl was being chased by flying monkeys, you know?
I mean, it's so hard when your older brother like unleashes hellhounds at prom. Like, how do you make a name for yourself?
Right.
How do you make a name for yourself as a Sunnydale creep
when your
brother pulls a stunt like that? Then you have to like find something to do anyway.
Yeah,
anyway.
It's always going to be a problem for Andrew.
Yeah,
but yeah, like generally the three of them, they give me this gross, horrible feeling, like whenever I watch them, you know. At the same time, I really do like what these guys do for the idea of human evil, you know. And the fact that evil is not, you know, monopolized by demons and vampires, that we are seeing the reality of what people can do. Who are just left to their own devices. And I like that discussion that we have in season 6. And actually, I really like season 6. The more I look at season 6 critically, the more I really enjoy it. But these guys, represent things that are very real within our culture that we have all had some experience with, I think, to a certain degree. And it is very difficult to talk about them and engage with them as villains because they are closer to a reality in which we live.
Yeah, I think you just hit the nail on the head. They're a little too recognizable.
Yeah.
Like, they're a little too recognizable, and I think you and I, and probably a lot of people listening to this podcast, do not need to be convinced of the toxicity present in men who don't uphold some, hyper masculine ideal.
Right.
Like, you and I do not need to be convinced that the man who is not the jock or the CEO or, fill in the blank with some other like masculine ideal in society because the patriarchy is a virus. You and I don't need to be convinced that like, hey, a dude can look unassuming and still be a predator.
Yeah. The most evil man I ever knew is pretty much one of these guys, in real life. And yeah. It's absolutely very disturbing to interact with it. It's a very real experience that a lot of people have had, and it can make season 6. And I think this is part of it, right? Here we are in Flooded, and we're going to come right back to why did all of this really shitty reality end up in my fantasy show? Right? Why are we not talking about this with a layer of metaphor between us and that, right? Which is what we've done up until now, right? There's been this layer of metaphor between it that we could kind of use as a buffer zone. And we don't get that in this season. We are going directly into it. And it is uncomfortable. And I don't enjoy it as much, especially in episodes like this where we're actually dealing with a pile of bills on the table. I mean,
like a literal pile of bills.
There is nothing I hate more than goddamn paperwork. And if you give me a demon that is made of nothing but papers and paperwork and forms to fill out, oh my God, that's horrible. So, so when we look at all of this, when we see the reality of Buffy's situation, when we see the reality of our healthcare system, quote unquote, that ends up, people who do everything right get destroyed by our healthcare system. When we've got a kid who has to take care of her sister, having to get a shitty job, not getting paid for her work, and then we have these three on top of all of that. I think that's a reason why Flooded, I think, as a narrative, as a written episode of television, is not terrible, but it is really difficult to enjoy at all. And it ends up being like an irritant, it's like that little tiny piece of rock in your shoe as you're walking and you're like, ugh, it just feels like that. And maybe that's a sign of actually a successful episode, that it went after a particular effect and did it so well that I hate it. Yeah. Right?
I mean, we're like with Buffy in this episode. We are with her. She is having a hard time, and like, same girl.
Same girl. Yeah, exactly. And I think that Buffy, I like what we're doing with Buffy actually in this episode. I don't like what we're doing with her life, but I like what we're doing with her inability to connect. We have this wonderful moment, right? When Giles comes in and she walks over, and he hugs her and she hugs him back. You're still incredibly strong. And she's hurting him. She's hugging him so hard. Right. And there's that moment. And then when they talk, they're not connected, right? She is not even that aware of him. She has this lack of affect to the point that Willow, when Willow sees her get angry, is like, hey, you're angry. That's great. I slept with Riley and Angel.
Ask me how much I hate that scene.
It's so weird. I mean, so weird, right?
Like, what? What?
I don't know.
Anyway.
Yeah.
God.
I love, we have Buffy, we have her lack of ability to connect with anyone except Spike, right? Who pops into the backyard for one scene and opens the door to throw the demon in the thing just because James Marsters was getting paid to be in the episode. So let's go ahead and do something. But they didn't do much with him at all. But it's nice to see him there, But I mean, she goes into the backyard and she can actually talk to him about what's going on. She tells him, I have to pretend that I'm okay so that they're okay. I have to worry about how they're feeling, and is able to have that conversation with him, which I think is really good. But I also love the fact that like she makes all these jokes throughout the entire, and they just all fall flat.
She jokes so much in this episode.
Yeah.
Which I find really interesting.
Yeah. I was all that time being dead and frugal. Right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and maybe I just kind of find it fascinating because that is also my response to trauma.
Right.
Like, if my life weren't funny, it would just be true. And that is unacceptable, as Carrie Fisher said.
Absolutely.
like, I love that she's joking because she really, like, honestly, what else is she going to do? But no one else thinks it's funny.
No one else gets it. Like, she's just removed from everybody, We
could burn the house down for the insurance money. Plus, fire, pretty. And everyone's like, what?
Yeah, and they're just staring at her. They just don't get it, So she's so disconnected from everybody except, of course, Spike. Right?
Yes.
Which I think is really nice. And of course, I love we don't get much of Spike. There's not really anything to talk about, but it's always fun to see him because he's always fun, But yeah, I like all of that. Here's the thing that I thought was it felt so deliberate, as to be meaningful, but I haven't gotten the meaning out of it. So I was wondering if you had an idea. In the beginning, right, we have Buffy. She's standing at the kitchen sink. She's, everybody else is doing the morning time breakfast thing, and she's just running the water. Right. Yeah. She's just running and staring at the running water. And then Willow has to come over and shut it off. Then down in the basement at the end, after she's killed, cookies. And, we, cookies. We hardly knew ye. So after she's drowned in cookies, she is just staring at the dripping faucet, which apparently they've had just dripping into the basement this whole time. It's like they're treating the basement's been flooded like that for a couple of days. There's no sump pumps going. There's nothing like that. It's not a pool. Like, that is going to destroy your foundation, and the whole house is going to collapse in. So, like, you really don't want to, like, have your basement just full of standing water for, like, days and days on end. I get it. But whatever. But she's staring at this, at this dripping pipe that's there and just staring at it. And I'm like, it seems to me like there should be some meaning to this running water that Buffy is so obsessed with. What is it? I couldn't figure it out.
I mean, okay, well, water is, generally speaking, a symbol of the unconscious mind or our emotions. So when she's watching the water just slip down the drain in the beginning, she can't connect. It's that lack of affect. She can't connect to emotions. They come out of the faucet and they go straight down the drain, right?
Okay.
But then at the end, there's this buildup of flooded, not the emotional, it's the emotional weight of everything that has happened. It's the overflowing responsibility and this emotional state that she describes to Spike of trying to, she says it so great, so well, and I wrote it down. It's in my notes. Here I go. I'm scrolling. I didn't write it down, but she talks about it being exhausting, spending a bunch of time trying to be okay so that the people who love her won't worry. So it's this, like, it's this buildup of emotion. So at the end, she's standing in this water, which is a literal problem she has to solve. Yeah. As well as a symbolic representation of all of the emotion that she has nowhere to go. Yeah. She just has to hide it under the house. There's nowhere for it to go. Yeah. But at the end, she's literally standing in it. She's like waist deep in it because there's so much.
It's inescapable.
She is emotionally flooded. Her life is flooded with problems and responsibilities, and there's just no outlet. There's
and
nowhere.
Her demons are literally floating in it dead.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I love that. I love that read. I knew you would have a genius read. You're the best. All right, Noelle, what's your favorite part?
Oh my gosh. I have a couple of favorite parts. I have a couple of favorite parts, mostly because I love Giles's work dad.
Yeah.
I love Giles offering to go through every single bill with Buffy in the morning.
Yeah.
I'm an acts of service love
Yep.
language person, so that does it for me.
Yeah.
If I have a pile of bills as big as I am and you're like, look, in the morning, just one by one, we'll just take care of this.
Yeah.
Also, Giles offering to be Dawn's control group for her serial experiment.
Oh, right. Yes.
I mean, I call him work dad, and I think he is work dad
Yeah.
still in this episode, but if for a few minutes he stops being work dad and is just dad.
Mm-hmm.
And I like it. I'm pro dad.
It's kind of wonderful.
Yeah.
See, I told you you're not a misandrist. You just don't like the bad men. That's all.
I just don't like most men like this.
All right. Send your letters. Sorry, just joking. All right. So my favorite part in this episode is the Giles and Buffy reunion. That moment when he says, "You're a miracle," and I always knew that. Like, oh my God, it makes me cry every single time. And I just loved it. I love reunions. It's my favorite thing.
Thanks, work dad.
Thanks, work dad. All right, if you enjoyed this conversation, would like to join in, connect with the show on Twitter, follow @Chipperish and use the hashtag StillPretty.
This episode of Still Pretty was brought to you by the Chipperish Media producers who support us on Patreon at the power producer level. These people are the reason why Still Pretty is coming to you free and ad-free right now, so thank you to our September producers. Abigail, Alice, Erica, Rose, Jonathan, Kristen, Sarah, and Shelley. And this week's special message for our power producers: breakfast is the most important meal of the day. It's unbelievably important. You should eat breakfast at least 3 times a day.
To find out how you too can support Chipperish Media, visit patreon.com/Chipperish. Other ways to show your support: write a great review on Apple Podcasts, tell your friends about the show, or have a cappuccino and a pack of cigarettes to go with your research.
We will be back next time with Life Serial, the 5th episode of season 6. Until then, that's not a horn.